grew up at a young age caring for others before worrying about himself. While attending high school, Daniel excelled at the Salvation Army, where he did it all from working in the after-school to summer day camp programs, where he later became the director and the assistant to the commanding officer. Later in life, Mr. Barber became president of the Resident Association, where he has been assisting not just the residents of his development, but of public housing as a whole. He is also, among others, the founder of Save Our Youth, a Community Board 1 member, Mentoring and Youth Support PSMS 29, member Life Camp Inc., council member Arroyo's Roundtable, president Bronx Works Classic Center Advisory Council, and a member of the hiring panel for SOS South Bronx, aka Save Our Streets. His motto is, if you can change the way people think and change their mindset, then you change the community and its outcome. To his left is Shoshana Guy. Shoshana Guy is a journalist who has worked for more than a decade in television news, both as a producer and correspondent. Currently, she is a senior producer for NBC News. Among many news events in the last year, she has covered the unrest in Ferguson, the diplomatic opening in Cuba, the 70th anniversary of D-Day, where she produced an interview with the President of the United States, and the Oscar Pistorius trial. Shoshana's work covers a broad range of issues, but she is perhaps most interested in criminal justice and issues of violence. To that end, she has worked on stories in Chicago, Brooklyn, Juarez, Mexico, and Camden, New Jersey. Her work in Camden earned her a Peabody Award in 2013, and Shoshana holds a Master's of Journalism from Columbia and is based in Brooklyn. And to Shoshana's left is Erik Cliette. Erik is an educator, leader, trainer, and mentor who has touched the lives of many children and adults around the world. With more than 20 years of professional and academic experience, his work is guided by the powerful maxim, to whom much is given, much is expected. He is the Senior Director for Health and Hospitals Corporation's Injury Prevention and Anti-Violence Work, Guns Down, Life Up. Cliette created a framework for injury prevention coordinators and their related trauma specialists who wish to adopt the GDLU method of addressing gun violence, injury prevention, and intervention within medical facilities. Embedded in this purpose is the mission to reduce injury rates to children who are traumatically injured due to gun shootings, assaults, stabbings, and other unintentional injuries. This work is largely guided by the highly successful practices of the GDLU program initiated at Harlem Hospital, in conjunction with the nationally recognized efforts of the Harlem Hospital Injury Prevention Program, where he served as director for more than 12 years. The Harlem Hospital Injury Prevention Program, with its many programs, is credited with reducing injury rates to Harlem's children by more than 60% during the program's 25-year history. As a community leader serving the economic, historical, cultural, and health needs of city residents, Erik often serves on panels and provides lectures and workshops around anti-gun violence, financial literacy, pregnancy prevention, home safety, leadership, and social human development. In 2004, Erik was awarded Columbia University's Xanthos Prize for Outstanding Service in the Community. So thank you to all of you for participating in this. I'm going to turn over the reins to Mike, who will moderate.
Yeah, I want to thank you all for coming. Yeah, super honored to have a panel like you all here.
Happy to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I just want to say quickly, Nina Robinson, who's one of our main volunteers and a photographer here for the last couple of years, her aunt was, her cousin was caught in a shootout a few days ago with her 2 kids in Oakland, and she was trying to protect the 2 kids, and she was shot to death. And that's something that we're dealing with right here. And Danny's I'm not going to talk about the violence in this neighborhood because Danny knows all about it. But I'm wondering if maybe you could just start out briefly and just talk about your reaction to the movie, how you felt about it in regards to the work that each of you has done around here.
Would it be all right if we let the lady go first?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I have a personal connection to that film because the footage that that opens in the opening with the brick and the girls running off it is actually my footage. And you know, I had come there when James was making the film, and I said, look, I know you're deeply embedded in this. You know, we're just here for a second. I was working for PBS at the time, and it just so happens, like, you know, you work for access, and then you just kind of, sometimes it's just where you are at the time. And he had gone to the hospital with the guy who, and we said, no, you go with him, we'll stay here. And then came the sisters, and so he called me after and said, hi, you have some footage. I said, of course, and you can have it. So I actually hadn't seen it, so it was really, really moving to see it, and, you know, had a familiar feeling with everybody. And I think, you know, the thing that most resonates with me that I think we don't often talk about is the trauma that's underneath everything. When you start really like cutting, and you saw that in those characters, you know, in the particularly in the girl that Amina was working with. So when you start getting underneath all of that, what's underneath all that violence is really significant trauma, personal trauma. And, you know, people don't have the tools to deal with it, and the resources aren't there to really address those issues of trauma, and so they come out in violence. And so that, for me, was, I just thought he did a beautiful job of portraying that.
Well, my point of view is a lot different. First, I want to apologize. The two gentlemen that left out with the SOS shirts, they were coming to help me out today. They were unable to stay because they had a response on Jackson Avenue and the Bronx that they had to go to. So it's basic.
By response, you mean violence?
Yeah, shooting response. What happens is with SOS, they're both violence interrupters as well. So whenever there's a shooting in their catchment area, what they do is they go out to the particular location and they try to intervene, find out who was the shooter, what was the incident about, and just get in the middle of everybody's business to stop it from retaliation proceeding to go on and somebody else getting hurt. Like Mike said in the beginning, when she read my bio, yeah, I sit on the hiring panel with SOS, and I wanted to do that because this community, over the past, say, 10 years, we've had multiple homicides, and only 2. I say a total of the last 10 years, there's been about 25, and only 2 have been solved by NYPD. So, I mean, demographically, living in a community like this, the poorest congressional district, I was upset for years that Congressman Serrano, because I always felt he can do more, but as sitting down with his team and really speaking with him, it's bigger than Serrano. If the cost of living goes up, if the minimum wage goes up for this community, and living just itself becomes a lot better, you can change the demographics of this community. The people, they like each other, they get along, but at some aspect, you have more than me. The jealousy starts to kick in. And how do you deal with that on a day-to-day basis? Sometimes it's tough. Sometimes I don't even know how or what to say to them. But I just try to keep it positive, and I tell them, well, look, God will make a way. I mean, he wouldn't bring us this far just to leave us. So, I mean, it's rough. It gets tough. I'm glad to see the documentary center here and showing awareness films like this. Hopefully, I can partner with Mike in the summer and we can bring the films to the housing developments, and we can call it a bring your own cheer event.
Can I just say that we showed a movie up at Claremont, right in the middle of the housing projects in the courtyard, and the police tried to stop us. They said, you're going to have violence, people are going to be killed, and what we had was a whole courtyard full of mothers with their children, grandmothers, people eating popcorn. It was the most peaceful event that they had up there.
We're going to make it better because NYPD wants to partner with us now.
So I think that documentaries and films generally end up being good spokespersons for the type of work that we all do. because it allows folks who live in the suburbs, folks who live in worlds where this sort of violence doesn't really show its ugly head, an opportunity to see what happens to other parts of America. And the thing is, there's so many stories that are embedded in the film, or in films like this, that you don't have an opportunity to get close to and touch, and you wonder, you say, well, why should I be concerned about this? Because, if you watch it long enough and you recognize the reason that people should be concerned about this type of work is because the self-same folks who are being affected by this work are the same people who ultimately will air their violence on anybody. They feel undervalued, devalued, and unappreciated. They will say, well, you don't appreciate me, you are the persons or the people that I ought to kind of go after. You come in my environment, you become my target. So the power of the film, I think, is that it gives an opportunity for audiences that would not come to a place like Chicago, come to Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, come to Harlem, come to the South Bronx, an opportunity to see how life is in these urban environments for folks who are not making a whole lot of money, where jobs and employment aren't really available. And it also says that there are a lot of champions within these communities, people who are really, really vested in making sure that there's an opportunity for our young people to see a broader horizon. The work that we do with Health and Hospital Corporation around Guns Down Life Up, this is my plug for my program, Guns Down Life Up, is that we try to provide young people with positive things to do with their otherwise free time. Hospitals are open 24 hours, so if there are places where kids need to find a safe haven, we want to say that your city hospital system has an opportunity to be that place for you. We have programs where there's opportunities for kids to be out of harm's way. And then as it relates to the interrupter family, I don't know how familiar everybody is with cure violence broadly, but there are interrupters, there are now a group of folks called hospital responders, and they're outreach workers. And the hospital responder component means that folks who were typically violence interrupters at one point now actually come into the hospitals and have an opportunity to talk to patients in that critical, I guess they call it the golden hour, when the patient is at that point where they're deciding whether they're going to try and retaliate or whether they're so scared, what do I do now? There's an opportunity for somebody to speak to them who comes from a community, comes from a background, comes from a place that probably appreciates where these victims are. And in that opportunity, they're able to say, hey, look, let me tell you what happens when you die or when you're hurt. It affects everybody that you're connected to, your children, your parents, your neighbors. There are a lot of people that love and care for you. So I think that again, this type of film gives an opportunity to open a dialogue to talk about all of these very, very important things that should and can happen around our country. And for my concern, specifically in New York City. I'll stop there for a minute.
No, great, thank you. One thing I wanted to ask, I don't know who wants to tackle this, but I did was doing some research earlier, and since the killings at Sandy Hook, where the 20 school children were killed, anybody know how many Americans have been killed by guns since Sandy Hook? 70,729 as of this morning. So we lost 58,000 soldiers in Vietnam in 14 years. Since Sandy Hook, we've had 70,000 Americans killed by handguns. I thought it was a typo. I went back and double checked it, but it's not. So I don't know if any of you have any thoughts on some of the, we could talk all night about the root causes, but does anybody have a thought on, anybody want to tackle where this is coming from?
I think that one of the key elements is economics. I think that when people feel like, there's a mental health component, there's an economic component, and I think that those are probably the two that are easiest to chime in on. When folks don't feel like they have an opportunity, they don't have a way to feed their families, they don't have a way to clothe themselves, they don't have an opportunity to speak out, I think that they respond violently. If I have to, you listen to the words that you hear all of your rap singers sing, Biggie Smalls. He used to say, all I was trying to do was make a few dollars to feed my family and my daughter. That's probably a truism. And I think that, that's a critical component. And the other side of it, I think Shoshana spoke about it earlier. You talk about mental health, the trauma that is related to being constantly told that you're not smart, you don't have value, you're never going to get a job, and then people beating down you, or you watching somebody else being injured or hurt. I think all of those things weigh really, really heavily on the mental capacity of all of us. And if we pay attention to it, I think, if you don't have places or outlets to get help, I think it shows itself in the violence that we see. I mean, there's a whole other domestic violence component that we could talk about as well, but that's my stab at it.
Yeah, I mean, and I think on a policy level, it's really, and this is, I think, slowly starting to come to the surface, but, like hashtag the war on drugs hasn't worked. And I think that this war on drugs has really generated an extreme amount of violence, and it feeds into the same thing that you're saying, which is that when the economic opportunity is drugs, and then you get caught in the system where you're incarcerated. I mean, we spend $80 billion a year as a country on incarceration, and when people are saying, oh, like, what does that really have to, like, I can't relate, like, how does that it's actually your tax dollars. So even if you have a heart of soot and like don't think that people actually deserve a second chance, you're still paying for it. So I think that as a country, and in terms of policy, and in terms of voters, we need to really demand that this gets because it does have to do with the violence, and we need to really examine it. And when you've got Charles Koch and Newt Gingrich and Rand Paul, it is coming from the conservative side as well, like where enough is enough. So I think
You're saying these folks are trying to close
yeah,
the need.
yeah. I mean, the right is finally, the conservative. I mean, there's, the libertarians are like, it's big government, and the, conservatives are saying, well, we can't afford it anymore, and then you've got evangelical Christians who are like, actually, this is wrong. So there is a movement, and I just encourage everybody to get involved politically as well, because it's just the way we have the system going doesn't work, and that feeds back into encouraging violent communities.
They answered it totally fine. So I don't even need to.
Beautiful. Can we open it up to some questions?
Sure.
I'm sure people here have a lot on their mind. I know I'm seeing a lot of faces here that I know are healthcare workers and people that really are devoting their lives to making this. So I'd love to get a conversation going. Yeah.
I guess I just want to thank you for holding this event. It's such an important issue. And I liked how in the film they said it's a disease, and that they expect to die of this disease. And we have shots to take care of measles, and we have shots to take care of so many diseases, and we don't have the shot. I mean, I don't want to, it's no pun intended, but for this disease. And we know the risk factors. It's abuse, it's poverty. We know the problems. Unfortunately, the CDC has not been permitted to do research in this area. We have like seatbelts for cars to make them safer, car seats to make kids safer, but we haven't had the research. We shouldn't have to sit around saying, well, we think it's that or we think it's this. We should have the statistics to go to Congress and say, look, this is what we need.
And that is, I mean, there's a whole movement of pediatricians and doctors and everything that are saying gun violence is a public health issue, just the way we have to get behind it. I mean, when I was a kid, my parents just turfed us in the back of the car and drove off. There were no car seats. There were no, but now we know we put on our seatbelts so that you don't die. So, I mean, there is a movement towards, unfortunately, funding was cut off from the CDC for years, as you well know, I'm sure. So, the funding has to come back for that.
And I just want to differentiate the mental health issue. They often get Sandy Hook, they blame it on the crazy people. It's not the crazy people that are doing it. It's the mental health problems that result in being exposed to violence. And so I guess as doctors, we have several doctor groups here, 3 of us, Doctors for America, National Physicians Alliance, Physicians for Social Responsibility, Lincoln Hospital, and we're all really dedicated to interrupting the cycle of violence earlier. We need to start when babies are born, to support these families so they don't become violent.
Right. Beautiful. Can I just say that I know that one of the things that I found, which I'm sure you already know, is the greatest indicator of whether or not young people will be involved in violence is if they're in an area where other people are involved in violence. So people who are growing up in nonviolent communities are nonviolent. It's as simple as that, and that's all over the world. That's across race, that's across class, across everything. If you're growing up in the midst of a lot of violence, you move, and you're, there are certain changes, that I'm sure you all know a lot more about. But I found that fascinating, that was the greatest indicator, was really proximity to violence. So.
Yeah, I'll just comment quickly on that. There's one of the interrupters that works in Harlem. He's constantly saying, hurt people, hurt people, hurt people, hurt people. And that's, I think that kind of encapsulates, I think, the point that you're driving at. Community and specific.
Alexis? Yeah?
So you really hit home when it's about the economics. So what is your experience? Because one of the highlights to me of that film is at the end when you see Flamo, who's now a security guard, because he was so gang-banging and heated, but they touched him and then he got a job. But what is basically his success rate? Do they normally keep these jobs, or do you see a return to the gang-banging lifestyle?
I think there are a couple of things that happen. And there are a couple of things that need to be done to support this. So folks who've never had a job before, folks who are formerly incarcerated to come out, they're looking for these great jobs and they get these jobs, but they don't understand the corporate structure, the corporate system, and they will, in some cases, make errors. And so we have to actually instruct the folks that are hiring this population of folks that, let's give them the skill sets so they can work in a structured environment. Because if not, what they will do is they will relate to or return to the system that they used when they were inside. Like when you see somebody and you want to deal with a situation, you don't necessarily write the memo. You step to the dude who bumped you. And I'm trying to be politically correct in the way that I express it, but the long and the short of it is, you will either return to the mentality or the system that you understand, or you got to show them a new way. And I think a lot of times we miss the opportunity. I want to give a guy a shot, but you forget, when you give this person an opportunity, you also have to give them the training that will have them prepared to be part of this environment, or else they'll fail. Because they don't understand the rules that are tied to HR. They don't understand the office politics and how you have to kind of document everything that you do electronically and otherwise. And if they don't have that tool set, that skill set, and if you don't give them an opportunity to learn that, I think that there's a good opportunity that they will fall out of that system, and then they're at a place where they want to do well, they want a job, but you also got to figure out how to eat.
And creating more opportunities again, it's like, I think the Prop 47 stuff that happened in California in November, people are, there's these really...
Can you explain what that is?
Sorry?
Can you explain what that is?
Oh, Proposition 47, it was basically went to the voters, and they've changed so that you can get rid of your felonies, so that felonies become misdemeanors. So there's a bunch of offenses that, under $950 if you've robbed someone, small drug offenses that instead of being deemed felonies, they're now being deemed misdemeanors, and it's retroactive. So there's really encouraging stories coming out of that, which is people being able to change the felony, which basically bars you from being able to work. And so many people have, 1 in 13 black people can't vote in this country. That's an alarming statistic based off of felonies. So that's also encouraging. And I'm hoping that other states are going to, it would be great if it would proposition up on the ballots, because getting rid of those felonies is going to open up that economic opportunity to a huge group of people. Just can't. I have a nephew going through it right now. You just can't get a job. You're officially disenfranchised. So.
Danny, do you see people relapsing, or do you see success stories in the work you're doing?
Well, we get a lot of success stories, but you get a few that relapse. The ones that relapse tend to want to play both sides. They're not finished with the street, so they want to do better because they see their children, they see their families and whatnot, but then they also try to keep up with the Joneses in the street. So with SOS, what they tell them, and we tell them on the hiring panel, we straight out ask them, do you still have any gang involvement? who are you in the gang? What was your title in the gang? Do you have street credibility? When we choose the individuals, and I think a lot of them get it misconstrued when you ask the question about street credibility. So if I go out on the street and I ask, who's Mike? Is Mike a reputable person? Is Mike, if a problem popped off in the street and I needed information and I called Mike at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, can Mike turn over from out of his sleep and give me a complete rundown? It was Danny and Shoshana, they did X, Y, and Z at X, Y, and Z time, and they was on so-and-so and so with so-and-so and so. I'll call you back in 10 minutes with the rest. So it becomes the credibility, and then when the people see that you're trying to change, you get a lot of resistance. You get a lot of hesitations because, like you said in the beginning of the Interrupters, the founder, he got a lot of resistance from the street, as well as those he was helping, the police. It's not, cure violence work is not for the violence interrupter, the hospital responder, the outreach worker. You're not a private informant for NYPD. You have no association with the police department whatsoever. Actually, a lot of the VIs really don't care for the police. A lot of them don't like the police. And they have to have that attitude. It's not that they're stuck on being criminals. It's just the fact of the matter that on the street, this is my team. And on the street, my credibility is so reputable, we can walk down Cortland Avenue, and I'm gonna give you my street name. You can say Big Worm. You know Big Worm, and everybody will tell you, yeah, I know Big Worm. And any one of you can walk out here 3, 4 o'clock in the morning and say my name, and I guarantee you safe passage. And that's anywhere you go in New York City, because I never stepped on toes, I never burned bridges. And it's like every neighborhood I go into is that man, the man, and that neighborhood, it always flocks to me. I don't know, my mother just said it's you, but it's all about the credibility. And you have to, because if someone feels that you're not a reputable individual, your team is dead. I'm sorry, I can't put it no other way. I can't take on my conscience going out to do interruption work in the street. And I say I'm credible to get the job, but when it's time to do the work, my credibility says something completely different. So, I mean, it's rough. It's rough, it's a hard job. So the turnaround rate, it becomes, some don't make it. I have a young man that in the South Bronx, he was the cause of 50% of my homicides from 137th Street between Alexander and the Bruckner to 188th Street between Davidson and Katona. And I convinced him to get off of the street. He was a value part to the SOS team. He was so used to working at night, he couldn't get up in the daytime to go to work. But his job started at 3 o'clock. I gotta pick the kids up from school. He gave them 99 million excuses. They work with him. You get opportunities, you got a job, you wanna change. You have to change your ways and you change the outcome of your community. A lot of them don't want to change. Change scares people, especially in our communities.
I don't want to just add something. That, I think that the work that our violence interrupters do, our hospital responders do, our outreach workers do, our cure violence team do, it is outstanding work. They put their life on the line every single day to to make sure that folks in their respective communities are safe, they can walk the streets, that they are champions for peace. And I think that that needs to be acknowledged. And it also needs to be pointed out that these men and women see an awful lot of trauma. They see a lot of situations. They are in high pressure situations a lot. And I think that we need to do more to make sure that they have services that allow them to vent. They have an opportunity to let some of that stuff go. Because PTSD, you know, you hear about it being true for victims of war, but it's true for these great warriors in our community. And we need to make sure that we are keeping them safe, because if they fall off, if they get burned out, if they lose because they've worked so hard, we lose an amazing asset to each of our respective communities. So, you know, as you start talking about the things you hear today, here tonight, about cure violence and the work that is done in cure violence as it relates to our interrupted population, hospital responders, and outreach workers, keep that in mind. You know, they do incredible work, and nobody else can do the work that they do. You know, I grew up in Harlem, and I have lots of friends that have done lots of very interesting things. But there are only certain folks that you can have a conversation with. You know, there's certain populations that you can't get to unless you have that badge of honor that says, yeah, I remember that brother. Yeah, he was a good brother. Or I have an inroad with this clique or this crew. So I always make it a point to applaud the great work that you do. It's hard work, and the thing is, violence doesn't have a, you know, I'm in at 9, I'm out at 5. Violence happens when it happens. Generally, it happens at night. A lot of it happens at night, but it could happen anytime. And so these guys are on call 24/7, 365. So the point is, they do a really, really difficult job. And most of them are really, really committed. And so I would also argue there probably is some burnout that ties into, I can't do it no more. I'm working 50 hours a day, and I got 2 kids. I got to, you know, there's a lot that goes into it. So that's what I should. Thank you, brother. Thank you for the work.
One thing, we've been having a lot of classes coming through this show. On Wednesday alone, we had 80 kids from the surrounding schools here. And one of the conversations we've been having is around masculinity and manhood. And, you know, I grew up, my father was an ex-Marine, had guns all over the house. We played violent sports, and a lot of the way I was brought up was that manhood was related to violence and the capacity to do violence. And I think that's an American thing kind of across the board. And, you know, it's also, we've had a lot of violence out here, and a lot of it's been about respect, and this is how I'm going to be a man. You've infringed upon my manhood in some way, and I have to redeem myself. And I'm wondering if any of you have any thoughts on that.
I certainly do.
You guys are the men.
Well, first of all, I mean, you know, we think that if anybody that wakes up and thinks that they have this natural ability, I would argue not so much. I think that what happens is, in every single case, boys are taught how to be men from men who have lived long enough to see what situations have happened in their life. This is why mentoring to me is such a critical part of what we do in each of our communities. Everybody needs a mentor. Men who are old enough to have lived through this life have probably seen the same things that men generations before them had seen. They see the landmines, they see where the issues are, they see where the problems are. But if you have a child, a male child who's growing up in a household and they don't have a father figure, they don't have a male figure in the household, it's very, very difficult for that young person to develop into this masterful, respectable man figure that we're talking about. So, sure, men, I believe, traditionally were the folks who were supposed to protect their household, right? So you disrespect my household, sure. I want to protect my wife, I want to protect my children, I want to protect my community. But you also have to understand where that line is drawn. Is somebody stepping on your sneaker? Is that disrespectful, or is that a mistake? And if you don't have somebody to help you negotiate the difference between, you know, that's not something we fight over. But you came in and you slandered such and such. it's a different type of conversation. And I think that our young men in particular are not having the opportunity to have somebody share with them what the distinctions are. They're not becoming men in the traditional sense. They're turning 18, right? They're turning 19, 20. Some of them are living past 25, right? Many of them are not. But unless you have a mentor, somebody who can help you understand what life is about, help you understand the financial ramifications of being a father, understanding what it means to take care of a wife, what it means to take care of your children, right? Somebody who can explain things to you and will consistently be there for you. I think that's where we get these issues. You have these boys who are physically men, but they're not developed as men, and I think that that's a problem, which is why I support, another plug for what we do. We do a lot of this mentoring work for our young people, because I'm of the opinion that that is a gaping hole in the development of our boys' tradition. And I think you saw that in the film as well. A lot of them, I think the boys and the girls are crying out because there were no men in their families to help them come along. I mean, Amina, I think she said that. I was waiting for somebody to come on my white horse to tell me that it was going to be okay. You're looking for that figure, and if that figure is absent, I think it's problematic for the whole community.
I would say two things just to add on to that. One of the things that I've noticed in a lot of the communities as it relates to boys, I wouldn't say boys and girls, but as it relates to boys, I work with a lot of young men in a bunch of different communities. And when I was in Ferguson, I went and I was with a bunch of, I think there were probably about 50 of them, they were about 17. And I said, it really is about fear and perception, I think, as it relates to manhood, because when I said to them, how many of you feel that people are afraid of you? All the hands went up. And then I said, how many of you feel afraid when you walk around? And all the hands went up. So if there's this idea about these boys in particular, particularly boys of color, I think, that people are afraid of them across the board, in their own communities, outside of their communities, everywhere, right? You see like a young black boy coming and you're afraid, but he's afraid too. So starting to sort of break that down is like they're allowed, that is part of being a man as well, is actually being able to be vulnerable and afraid. And they don't get that. They don't get that space to do that. So I think just perception is a big thing. And then the other thing I will say about violence is that girls, I was out in Brooklyn this week covering that. I don't know if you guys saw that horrible McDonald's video with the girl getting, senselessly kicked in the head. And boys are so important and they're so falling through the cracks in these communities. But as it relates to boys, the girls are just, because the girls are fighting about the boys and the boys are fighting about the girls. And so the DOJ is like 1 in 4 girls in high school is going to get into a physical altercation in this year. 1 in 4. They're fighting like crazy, and there's this whole social media, we were talking about it earlier, there's this whole social media, they get the likes on the Facebook, and so there's a lot going on with girls and violence as well that I think tends to slip through the cracks, because we don't think of girls as violent, but they are violent. And, it's
Do you think increasingly so?
I think increasingly. From the experts that I've talked to in the medical field and the social work field, yes, it's I think girls always beat each other up, but now they have social media to sort of validate that, and then the beef keeps going, and so it's don't forget about the girls.
In some aspects, I would say the girls are worse than the guys.
Yeah, it's.
And you have to look back. The young ladies, they've been involved since day one, where the police would run in the inner city communities and toss the guys, throw them against the fence or the car, and pat them down and search them, and they no longer carried the guns. The girls had the guns. So when you go to the parties, the guy don't go in the party with the knife or the straight razors anymore. The girls have it. They use their person to hide the weapons. A lot of places that they hang out, they have a lady that just, okay, you can go, and you let them in, and you're not doing a thorough search and not knowing this young lady has Mike's gun, my gun, and she's in the party now with 2 guns and she's dancing and she sees me in the club and she literally gives me my loaded weapon. So now, I mean, it's the peer pressure that plays a major part.
I love to see girls fight.
Yes,
It's just,
'cause-
I mean, put in girl fight in Google, and it is alarming.
It is, and
it's
I mean,
alarming.
you go crazy. I have a 7-year-old niece at home, and if it comes, she's so smart. Every day she comes home, she reads 10 pages out of a book, and after she reads that 10 pages, I would say, "What did you read?" She'll start to explain it and forget half of what she did. But for the next 2 hours, she's in front of the videos and know every video that come on. She knows Bobby Smurder, that's his name. The one that got arrested, the Smurder dance. She can do that 1, 2, 3. She was twerking before twerking became known. I mean, and she's 7. We have to really, like they said, both of, like everyone has been saying tonight, we have to start younger. It's mental illness at its best. There is so much money that the federal government, the state government, and the city government has out there, but they're not telling the grassroots organizations on how to combat it, because the government gets to keep that money. And they get to raise their salaries, and the problem still continues to go on, and little Johnny's not getting her help, and Martha's not getting the help they need, and it's not just medicine, it's just sometimes they need someone to talk to. They need someone that's willing to intervene and listen.
Could I just comment here regarding, I think, especially in our community, when it comes to women, it comes back to what you were talking about. There are, how many of them even have father figures in their homes? But in order to get the father figures, or in order to get that responsible male, these girls are out to survive. Among the whole youth population, there is anger. And there is something, I believe there is a mass genocide going on in our country this minute. And as much as people try to shun that word, no, we don't do that here in the United States. It's going on every single day. Okay? Where does that single mom go when she's getting ready to have a nervous breakdown? We do not have psychological services in our community. Try going to the emergency ward at Lincoln Hospital and say you have a psychological problem. And you watch and see what will happen to you. The resources are just not there. Okay, so there is a lot of anger on part of the adults, and there is a lot of, like what was just mentioned, the resources are just not there. Okay, all of us we have no choice but to become activists in our communities. I have lived in this neighborhood all my life, and I have never seen any form of reaching out as far as mentorship is concerned to the young men. Okay, so now you're not going to have responsible young men who know how to take care of daughters and who know how to give them the proper advice. So these girls are going to do whatever they have to do to so-called survive, because that's the advice that they're getting. They're being told, be tough and fight back. Don't let anyone hit you in school. It starts from a very basic principle. And I'm just giving that as an example. We are in the middle of a war right here in our own homes. I think that is the main situation that we have to admit, as much as we try to hide it.
Thank you, Rich.
Okay?
No, I mean, I think all you guys are really right on. I work with youth in foster care not too far from here. And it comes down to fear, and they don't feel protected, especially youth in care. They move from home to home, they're angry, and I see the transformation when they find a home and when they feel protected by these parents in the home. They feel safe. They never had a father to maybe go and defend. I had one girl, and she was going to a corner store, and they're like pimping her out, and the foster father went and said, that's my daughter, and this isn't gonna happen. And she felt safe, and you see their behavior start to transform.
So yeah.
So I just wanted to say, you know, well, I work at Lincoln, and, and we're really excited to have SOS start. I don't know if Lindsay is our injury prevention coordinator, and so we're really excited to start the SOS program there. And I'm a pediatrician, and I'm director of the Child Advocacy Center, so I see abused kids every day from this community. And I'm also seeing kids that are exposed to violence. So I think it's going to be a community effort. And I think it's great that you're having this event, because I think we need to work together. So I'm going to see the kids. I want to see the whole family. You know, you see the little kid is talking to his older brother and said, you know, you're my role model. And he's like, well, that's not the little Mikey. You know, it's the new Mikey. You know, we need to look at the whole families and support them to, again, stop the cycle of violence. So thank you. Thank you.
And thank you for being a doctor in our community. And I think we need more of that, you know, not just at Lincoln Hospital, but every other health center that's being built around. Like I said, the resources simply have to be there, and they're not there.
So let me also share with you. I mean, yes, we are very excited that Lincoln is on board, and they will likely have mentoring opportunities for our young men and our young women in our communities. But my role, in my bio, they said I'd worked at Harlem Hospital for more than 20 years doing this work. We've had a vibrant mentoring program at Harlem for more than 20 years. We've had lots of kids come through, get out of the community, go to college. We've had some great success stories. Given that background, I've been given the opportunity to kind of develop these programs, or help shape these programs in your New York City hospital system. So all your health and hospital corporation hospitals are getting on board. The banner that we promote is Guns Down, Life Up. So you'll see us at Bellevue. You'll see us at Woodhall. You'll see us at Kings County. You'll see us at Coney Island. You'll see us at Harlem and Lincoln, clearly already on board. You'll see us at all of your public hospital systems in New York, because we recognize the value of what we're talking about in this room tonight. We know it's an issue. We see it as a public health issue, and we think we can address it. And this is your public hospital system at work, trying to address these very same issues that we're talking about. So thank you for recognizing that it is an issue and kids need it. And finally, your hospital system has identified it, and they've identified some folks to help build it. And I promise you, in the next couple of years, because there are 11 full hospital facilities that we have to work through. We got to build them in each one, and then there's some outpatient clinics that tie into it. Ultimately, the hope is just like the doctor said in the film, that if this is a disease that we can get at it, we can find the root causes, we can kind of build a cure in our public health approach. But yes, I promise you that this has been my life's work, and I'm committed to making this happen for us.
And we're grateful. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Andrew, you had a question?
Yeah, you sort of just answered a big part of it. How many people are doing this work now in the Bronx? And how is it, so the hospital, HHC is funding some of this, but people doing this work, are they paid a reasonable amount of money? And how many people are able to do it now?
So, all right, so yes, Health and Hospital Corporation, there are a couple of ways that we work at this, right? So the mayor, de Blasio, and city council gave $12.7 million to get this initiative jump-started. So there's a component that's tied into the cure violence work that we've talked about tonight, or CeaseFire, cure violence. CeaseFire was the former name, it's now cure violence, in case that was not clear. So there are resources that have been put into this work because our political folks recognize that there's value in the work that we do. They recognize that our communities say this is work that needs to be done throughout our system. In our hospital systems, particularly in your level trauma systems, level 1, level 2 trauma systems, they require that there are injury prevention coordinators like Lindsay. And if it turns out that they're trauma registries, so the registries for every trauma that comes in suggest that penetrating trauma is of a high priority in that particular facility, then one of their areas of focus will have to be gun violence or penetrating violence, whatever it is driven by the registry. So that's good, that's great, that's important. My position as an injury prevention person is that, okay, we can build our programs around penetrating trauma, but we also need to do the preventative work, which means that we want to get to kids before they ever even have the opportunity to come to our facilities for being hurt. And this is where all the mentoring work comes in. We reach out to community partners. We hope that the folks that are in this room will be part of what we call a circle of safety that Lindsay will hold at Lincoln Hospital or in your respective communities. As we build these programs out in the hospitals throughout the city, we invite our community in to help guide us in terms of what we need to do to properly facilitate the needs of that specific community. So there are people that are on staff and paid to do this work. Now, as we recognize the value of the work, then there's an opportunity to put a higher price tag on the work, and we can have broader reach, there's broader bandwidth. Because when things start out, they give you some pilot money, you work it out until you prove that the work that you're doing is valuable, then there's opportunities to bring more people in. And I think the hope is that we can bring many city agencies around the table to kind of do this work. And we call that our circle of safety. We pull in our stakeholders from all around the city. Anybody that's interested in the work that we're doing, we would invite you to sit at our circle to help inform what we need to do and what our next steps ought to be. But there is sort of a master plan in place.
Bianca, you had a question?
Yeah, I mean, Mike mentioned you get a ton of schools coming in here to see this show, right? And a lot of things that come up are just like how such small things start fights. And so I always wonder, like, what kind of programs are available in schools, or like should be available in schools? Are you working in schools in the area to have ways to help kids like mediate fights or like talk through them? And I might embarrass you guys, but like, these are our friends, they're high schoolers in the area, and like I'm curious like what you guys think of what's being said and like what's available to you in schools, like if at all. You don't have to say anything.
Well, to the young people in the audience, I wear several hats. One of the hats that I wear is I am the citywide youth chair for the citywide council of presidents for the New York City Housing Authority. I was given a grant last year to do a program with prospectively 45 young people within NYCHA developments, and it died down to a solid 15. These young people had to go out and do 4 activities to reach 100 of their peers. We did a screening of triggering wounds. I got 125 young people to come out to that. The young people also did a panel like we're doing, and they facilitated a workshop. They went through the grassroots problems, the problems that we don't see that causes the problems that the young people have day to day. They came up with scenarios and different options on things that can be done to help the young people to get through those problems. And out of those, say 15, 16 young people, they graduated. They did that. They did a cookout in Morningside Park. We helped Assemblyman Marco Crespo organize the Black, Hispanic, and Latino caucus out in Albany one year, and that served as an outing, and the last one was their graduation. They did such good work, the young people that they met in Harlem and Morningside Park decided to come to their graduation. So with that, the mayor's office was so proud of them, we received another grant to work with the mayor's office this year, the Department of Criminal Justice. So to the young people I say, peer pressure is hard, but whatever you want to do, and I love your safe haven, take advantage of it. If you have adults that are willing to really work with you and put a lot of emphasis and effort into the things that you want to do, utilize it. I don't deal with adults. I don't like working with adults. I really don't. Because they'll give you excuses, they'll beat around the bush. Instead of saying no, but you guys, you say how you feel. And that's how I live my life on how I feel. I'm gonna give you guys a jewel. I wanted to run for city council for this district. because the council member is termed out. And speaking to some other elected officials, you wouldn't make it as an elected official. Why you say that? Because you don't bite your tongue. You don't like lying to people. You tell it like it is. So I kind of retracted running for city council. I like the role that I'm in, to be able to work with the young people and not to have anything to hinder me and to stop me from speaking how I feel, the way I feel. I advocate for you guys. You guys are our future.
I think part of the question also was, do we reach out to the schools? Do we go to the schools? And what I'll share with you is that in the model that we are propagating within the hospital system, part of our outreach is to reach into the schools to have a biconditional relationship, meaning that we want to refer kids that may come into our trauma units to school programs that may exist, and if they're kids that are in the schools, the programs that are at the hospital, we would invite them in. So there is an active outreach to the schools, and there's an active outreach from the hospital back to the school. The point, and again, that is all drawn on what we're calling our circle of safety. So we look at our specific areas. If Lincoln Hospital is the centerpiece, then we look at the schools that may be near Lincoln. So maybe Cardinal Hayes, which is across the street, or I don't know all of the schools that are around Lincoln. Smith, or what have you.
Smith right across the street.
We would invite folks from Smith to kind of sit at the circle and figure out where there's some opportunities where we can have children from each of these respective schools and community environments to be part of the Lincoln community in terms of the programs that they will run and the mentoring that they'll do. And maybe if we can't do it all within facility, we'll send a team out to do some work at the specific school. But that's all in the making, and Lindsay Heacock is the point person to make that happen for you.
Can I just say, I don't want to put our young people on the spot too much, unless, I don't know if they may just hate me more than they already do, but Olga, I mean, a couple of them live right down the block. Olga's been volunteering here for a couple of years, and I think, Olga, the second or third time I saw you was when they killed the guy down under your window here. I remember somebody shouting my name and looking up, and you were looking down, you know, where the body lay. And that's one of 3 homicides on this block in the last couple of years. And I don't mean in the neighborhood, I mean on this block. And I'm wondering how you guys feel about safety and violence here, if you have anything to say about it. Any thoughts? Does anything come to mind? Or?
I feel like, all right, so the reason why there's so much, like, yes.
This is Kendrick, who's one of our interns.
The reason why there's so much fight is because there's, like, when you're walking around, like, I guess the neighborhood, the community, it's more like a non-trust. You don't trust anyone, so you see everyone as your enemy, basically. So that's why, and it's also determined on the very first impression. A lot of people determine each other on the first impression. So when you're in school, the reason why there's so much fights, because girls may not like each other just by seeing them. Oh, I don't like the way she looks. So they'll find any reason, it could be something little for them to fight over, just because they don't like them, because they don't, basically the fact they don't trust them. That's why there's so much fights, like that happens all the time. This lack of trust, this first impressions. And you see, when you're walking around, everyone that you see, young person, Spanish, black, you see them as an enemy. You don't like them for no reason. Basically because the way society is set up. In the communities, the way you have to, if you don't be like everyone else, that means if you don't fight back. And it's also the way you're raised up. Parents even raise their children up now. If you don't fight back, then that's it. Like, if you don't fight back, they want you to fight back. If someone does something they don't want you to walk away, they basically want you to fight back. So it's kind of the way parents raise up their kids also, but some of them do and some of them don't. But it kind of like goes down a chain link. Like, they was raised up this type of way, so they're going to raise their kids up this type of way, and they're going to raise their kids up this type of way, so the society and community just getting screwed up. Basically.
Thank you, Kendrick. You should be up here on the panel. You had a question, or?
No, I have a lot of, I just need to address this young man. So what I'm hearing you say is exactly what the movie is called interrupters for a reason. When or how do you guys, because you're the ones that are the next generation, you are the generation that's here, and we're hoping will be the next generation. Where would you start? Just give me one thing that you would say, okay, this is one little place where you can start to address some of this, so that you can break that chain or break some of that cycle. Because it's very frustrating as a mother, as someone who has seen a lot, but to know that this is still going on, and that it's growing exponentially every single day. As I get older, it grows more and more. And I don't lose hope, and I'm an activist, but I want to hear from you. So for instance, the gentleman said, we have this link, and they will be going into schools, but I want to know from the young people, what would you say would be the place for us to start to help you? If
Honestly,
you can. I mean, I know it's,
It all starts, honestly, you can't change, you can't go back in the past, you can't change how it is, it all starts with you. Because if you change it and you choose not to be like, that's when other people are gonna follow you, because everyone has their own personality, everybody's for their own self. Not everybody wants to fight, not everybody wants to be like that. So when they see someone stands up for themselves, is not gonna fight, they're gonna follow that person, and it'll go down as that, and that's when the community can start changing. But it all starts with you, you gotta change yourself before you can change anyone else. You gotta choose not to be a follower, but you gotta be a leader, your own self.
Olga, do you have any thoughts? You've got a lot of opinions.
I just feel as if, going back to what he said, parents are the ones that, when you're little, they teach you what's wrong, what's right, and when you get older, it's up to you to follow what you want to do. If you want to do what's wrong and what's right, they could just tell you, and if you decide not to follow, you have to follow your conscience. But therefore, like trying to start, you can't stop what another person wants to do. And it's not only that they want to do it, but that's what they see around, and they want to do everything that everyone's doing, supposed to be style, because that's what's going on. You don't have to do everything you see. You don't have to be the person that's next to you. You're your own person for the reason that you're just your own person. You do what you want to do when you want to do. But at the same time, you have to not only think about yourself, you have to think about the people that's around you. As if I have a little brother. So if he sees me cursing or using foul language, which practically if he doing something wrong, he's gonna follow me because he looks up to me. So at the end of the day, when he gets older, I cannot tell him why you're doing that because he sees it from me. That's just as if as much fault as the teenagers have or we have, as much fault as the parents because they allow us to do that, and they should be the ones teaching us not to do it. Once again, they could tell us not to do it, and we have the right not to follow it. But we're hurting ourselves and them.
I hear what you're saying. I just want to again go back. So look, the parents weren't parents of either. So that's what I'm. So my question goes back again. So Olga, like, what would you like to see? That's my question really. What would you guys like to see? How can we help you? What's the one thing or one or two things that you think of, if I had this, if my parents could engage with me, obviously you're not going to go back. That's a given. So starting from you, as you said, okay, you're going to teach by example, but as you said, the example you already have is not the most optimal. What and how can we help you to, again, start to love that playing field, shall we say?
I mean, once again, we all have arguments with our parents. That's something that comes up in nature, but sometimes it hits everyone differently. It could hit me when my mom argues with me, as in I just want to leave, or talk back, or I just don't want to be around her anymore. I could hit another child as if this is natural, I'll get over it, whatever, but it could also hit another one where they're going to commit suicide, or they just don't want to be around it because they feel that they don't have their father. A lot of, for example, I was a foster mom, so
when you see kids like that, some of them want to commit suicide because they don't have anyone around them. So you see that love. I mean, the best thing a parent can do is just love their child and tell them what's right. But once again, it's your choice if you want to follow or you don't want to follow. All I will do is tell you.
Can I just say that Olga's mother came to us a couple of years ago. She was in a school that had a lot of violence, and we helped. We got Olga into the Catholic school across the street. She's been there for 2 years, and she was just she applied to 4 of the top high schools in the Bronx, and she was accepted into all of them. Yeah, we've got to wrap it up quickly. Can we take one last question, or yeah?
So I just have a question, everybody. So how you were saying how violence, obviously if you grow up in violence, violence remembers violence. And I guess the way I'm thinking of it, because we always see a lot of like male mentors, and I feel like a lot of like women or female mentors are very important too to our young women. I myself as like a young mother, I was pregnant at 16 and had my daughter at 17. And you see young mothers who give birth to these men, give birth to these young women, and oftentimes that's when the men start perpetuating that violence because the mother's not in the home all the time. There's just not that support for women, for mothers, for young mothers, and so since they're always outside the home. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, where's that support for young women, and especially young women of color in our communities? And if y'all do that, if y'all have like women mentors, and what does that look like? And how do those women mentors, like, are they separate from just the men mentors? Because I think it's very important too to also kind of just foster with young women too.
So I would, and I'll jump in quickly, and I know other folks wish to answer. So the wonderful thing about folks from Lincoln being here, if you're in this community, is that this program is in its genesis. So the things that you talked about now are things that that will inform the way that they form their programs right down the street. And I will continue to say that everybody needs mentors. No matter how old you get, everybody needs a mentor. And so the question that I would have asked you all if we had more time is, who do you turn to when you have issues or questions? Because that, I think, is the core. Because the other thing I would argue is that it's hard for folks to know what they don't know. It's hard to ask a question or answer a question that you're not sure what the answer is or how to phrase the question. If you've been eating ground beef your whole life, you may not know what filet mignon tastes like. So you can't imagine what that question is because you haven't been there. So for children, young people, children relative, however we put it, to ask you what it is that you need, you may not know exactly what you need because you may have not lived long enough to recognize what you're missing, which is why mentoring becomes so important, which is why children should be part of the conversation, but you need adults and children in the conversation to inform what we need to do as a strategy. Because as we understand what the issues are, maybe we can articulate what the problem is and then develop an answer. So mentors at the hospital, maybe there needs to be a specific program that speaks to the issues that relate to young women. And as I said, they're actually in the room, they'll hear it.
Can I just say, we have to take care of the parents of these children, because especially single mothers, if you're under such stress and your child's father abandoned you and you don't have family yourself and you were an addict and all of these things, that you cannot parent. You can't parent under such stress. So we have a lot of kids coming in foster care, and it's not really because they're being beaten and severely abused like you see on the news. You only see those. It's because the parent didn't have any support. The parent was dealing with his or her own issues that they could not parent their child effectively. And so we have to really remember the parents and taking care of them as well.
Great, thank you. You're welcome to stay, talk amongst yourself as much as you like. We're happy to keep the conversation going. We know there's people that have to get out of here. Lastly, I just want to say that this show is up until March 22nd, especially if there's any school groups that you're affiliated with, church groups, any type of groups at all. We're here anytime. We have a few of Carlos's books left, and they're up on the counter there if you're interested. And please come and find me or Bianca if we can help you in any way. Thank you so much.